Hello everyone. In this movie, we're going to talk a little bit about timeline control via code. I know we did some exercises in class where we moved things through time and we stopped or played an animation based on clicking on the stage. This time, however, I want to give a little bit more control to the user by creating buttons that will allow me to jump from one state of a movie to another or from one frame to another without having to do it linearly. In the example in class, we clicked on the stage to make a plane move across the screen, and then we clicked again to make it move again. We used the go to and play action for doing that. In this case, we're simply going to jump from one frame to another, but we're not going to do it linearly. Now, for this, I have previously created a movie clip, a series of movie clips. They are all contained within this movie clip called Plain All, and that Plain All movie contains 4 frames. The first frame has a stop action so that the movie doesn't play past that point, and then the other 3 keyframes contain each one of them contains a different movie. So for example, if I go to the first frame and I go to its properties, you'll notice that the first movie clip, when I select it, it's called Plain Move. That's the instance that I see. If I go to the second frame and I click on the movie clip that's there, that one's called Plain Alpha. The third one is Plain Rotate, and the last one is Plain Scale. And as you can see in the library, each one of these has been created as a separate timeline so that I can create independent animations for each one of them. That is Plain Alpha, this is Plain Move, Plain Rotate, and Plain Scale. Now, these are all animations that I've created previously, and I just simply put each one of them in its own keyframe within the Plain All movie. Plain All is the movie that contains all of those keyframes, which contain each their own movie clips. And what I'm going to do is, through code, I am going to control which one of those frames plays by simply changing the position of the playhead inside the Plain All movie. So now, how do I do that? Well, that's like I said, in the Plain All, I have all those keyframes. I need to make a record of which one goes where. The first one is Plain Move. Second one is Plain Alpha. The third one is Rotate, and the fourth one is Scale. Plain Rotate, Plain Scale. So I make a memory note of that, and I go back to my scene 1, and I know that the order of the change in properties is going to be Move, Alpha, Rotate, Scale. So what I'll do is that I will go to the library, I will move that Plain All movie into my stage and place it on the stage. Then I am going to create a button graphic. So what I'll do, anything, by the way, any graphic, any movie clip, any item that you have as a graphic on the stage can be a button. And that is, it could listen for a click. What I'm going to do is I'm going to create a rectangle, and I'm going to change its properties. I'm going to give it a white color, and I am going to make it about 50% in opacity. So with that, I'm going into the stage and I'm dragging a rectangle. Now this rectangle I'm going to go back and select, and I'm going to turn it into a movie clip. Press F8 or go modify, convert to symbol, and this button I am going to call button BTN with capital B, and I'm going to leave everything else as is. I am not going to export it for ActionScript, although I could if I wanted to add it dynamically, but I'm not going to do that just yet. So what I'll do is I'll click OK. In that instance of button, I'm going to keep on the stage. I'm going to make 4 copies of this button. So I'll drag while pressing Control Shift and Alt keys on my keyboard, or basically making a copy just like you do in Illustrator or in Photoshop. If you don't know the shortcut for this, you can simply say Control C, deselect, Control V, and then you have your copy. Whichever way you find fastest. The shortcuts are basically the same between Photoshop and Illustrator and Flash or Animate in this case when it comes to copying and pasting. So I have created 4 buttons, And these buttons have no instance names. As you can see, each one of them is an instance of the movie clip button, but they all don't have their own specific names. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to select the first one and I'm going to give it the instance name button 1. The second one will be button 2, btn2. Third one, button 3. And the fourth one, button 4. Given each one of these the instance name button automatically makes them identifiable to the code. So if I refer to in the code, if I refer to button 1, the code expects me to be talking about this one. If I refer to button 2, it expects me to be referring to this one, and so on and so forth. So now let's go and start working with the code. By the way, I need to also name the plane because I simply dragged it up to the stage, but I didn't give it an instance name. If I need it to be recognized by the code, I need to give it a name. And in this case, I'm going to call it plane. P-L-A-N-E, plane. So now with that, what I'm going to do is I'm going to start coding to that particular plane. Remember, the movie plane has a stop action at the beginning that stops it from going through those 4 frames that we had created previously. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add a listener to the stage. I'm going to say stage, start listening please, add event listener, and I am going to listen for a mouse click. So this event is a mouse event of type click. Now when I click, I am going to change the state of the plane. So I'm going to call that function plane state. Close that, and that's the code for that listener. Now what this listener is listening to is anytime I click anywhere on the stage, it's going to be listening for a mouse click, and it's going to, once I click, it's going to check that function, is going to call that function plane state. Now let's define what that function is going to do. The function, if I can type function plane state, it's going to be an event of mouse event type, and what it's going to do is it's going to check to see which button I am clicking on. So for that, we could simply do a series of if statements. We could say if event target dot name. Now remember, we gave the target the instance of the buttons, each one of them, a name. So I said if target name, if the name of the target that I'm clicking on is, and that is the double equal signs. Remember, one equal sign assigns a value to a variable, to whatever is on the left side of the equal sign. 2 equal signs compares to see if something is equal to something else. So in this case, I'm comparing to see if the name of my target equals, and then I can say whatever the name of the target is. So I can say button 1, let's say button 1. Let's start with 2 to test. Button 2. So if I do that, then I'll say plane, the movie plane needs to go and stop frame 2. So it goes to the second frame and it stops. If I did my math correctly, clicking on the second button should take it to the next frame, which it does when I click on it. As you can see, it switches to frame 2. Now none of the other frames is active. As you can see, there's no code for them. This one jumped to the second movie clip that contained that animation with the transparency changes. So following that logic, I simply could copy this line of code 4 times, 3, 4, and then change each one of the buttons to tell it where to go. 1 goes to 1, button 2 goes to 2, button 3 goes to 3, and button 4 will go to button 4. I mean to frame 4. So now let's test that and see if it works. Now you might ask yourselves, why is this plane playing if I, in the movie clip plane, let me double click on it, have a stop action on the very first frame? As you can see, I have a stop action in that frame. Well, it stops the movie from playing each one of these 4 frames, and each one of them contains a separate animation. But the animation inside that playing movie still plays through. I never stop this animation. This animation still plays. So it only stops the movie that contains all of the animations within it. It doesn't stop the animations themselves. Now, let's say, for example, I wanted to stop everything. I don't want this movie to play when I test the movie. I don't want that plane to move. I want it to stay on the left-hand side of the screen. Well, then I need to reference that plane state inside the plain all movie. How do I do that? I need to give that movie clip an instance name of its own, and that movie clip I will call plane move. If I want to say plane move, and if I reference that from the code directly as plane move, then I can stop it, and I'll show you how in just a second. Let me go back all the way to scene 1, and the very first thing I want this to do when the movie starts is I want the plane movie plane dot plane move dot stop. That line of code is telling the sub movie to stop. The movie plane move inside the movie plane needs to stop. That's what I'm saying. So plane move is the very first movie clip inside plane all. If I test this, you'll see that the movie is no longer playing, but the buttons are active. So if I click on button 2, I start seeing the animation playing for frame 2. If I click on button 3, I see the rotation value changes because that is what the third button did. Button 4 plays with the scale. If I click now on plane 1, it will play the animation for the first frame. So making the call to stop the movie clip it only works at the beginning because that was the first line of code that I did. My clicking on this button basically calls back to that movie clip, and it's no longer stopped because it overrides whatever the second call to go to that frame overrides whatever stop action I had created for it before. So as you can see, I can jump from different states within these different movies, and they respect the animations that are within the embedded subclips. That covers basically having the ability to control a timeline. Doesn't have to be linearly. You could jump from one to the other without it being linear. So it gives you dynamic control of your timeline and not being constrained to one linear animation. It also showcases that we have the ability to animate separately into clips, into movie clips, and then drop those movie clips into a placeholder movie clip, in this case plain all, and then call the different animations through buttons or through clicks or through actions, through any events that we desire. They will remain separate, and it will be respected through any of the timelines.